Show is hosted by Tony Gaffestone and Christina Jackson. Thanks for tuning in. It's showtime.
Hey, thanks for tuning in, everybody. It is showtime. I'm Tony Gaffestone. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm wearing a green shirt, and I got my brown hair, my little scruffy beard going on. I'm a Caucasian guy, and I'm in my studio in Redwood City, California. It's got black background that says Brave Maker in it, and I'm very happy to be here today. Every week, I get to talk to creative people from all around the world who care about justice, diversity, and inclusion, and the arts as a way to express those values. And I'm always joined by my friend, co-host, and collaborator, Christina Jackson.
Hey, what's going on, Tony? It's wonderful to be back doing the show. I'm Christina Jackson, and my pronouns are he, she, they. I am queer and living with quadriplegia, and I'm coming to you from my Dublin studio here in Dublin, California. And I'm an actor, comic book writer, and singer. And I'm so excited for today's guest. I actually met her on the Will Queens podcast. Shout out to Christine Burke, my co-host. And I'm so glad that now we have her on our show.
Yeah, we're talking about demystifying disability today. We got a book we're going to chat about, which is really cool. Before we do that, it was Thanksgiving week, and it's the first day of December. I'm stoked on December. I love December so much, and I'm trying to be intentional about taking everything in and not letting it be a busy blur. But that leads me to our question. How are you braving your way toward your creative goals this week? What have you done? One step at a time. What have you done? What's happening?
I shared this with Tony yesterday. I gave him a little sneak peek. So I'm working on issue 1 of my first comic book, and I braved my way this week, finalizing the costume for my superhero. And it was such a tough decision. It came down to 3 looks. I shot him over to Tony to get his opinion on it, and it was unanimous. We went with number 2. And you'll find out what number 2 is when that comic book comes out. So that's how I've been braving my way. And it was fun, but it was stressful because it's like you want every detail to be right. You know, I think every creator feels that pressure. You just want every detail to be right and to speak and to express the vision that you're trying to share. And so that's how I'm braving my way. And what about you, Tony? How have you braved your way this week?
Okay, so in the same way, can you hear me okay? I'm wondering about my mic, or is this my thing? You hear me okay? All right.
Yeah, I can hear you okay.
Okay, great. So I connected with this amazing designer. I was just talking to our guest off air about how much I love graphic design and the art of the image. And this is the cool part about the digital age we live in, is you can find collaborators all over the world online and never meet face to face. So I met this really cool illustrator from the Ukraine who did a movie poster for one of our former guests, Nicole Regal, of the film called Holler. And I just reached out to her and I said, hey, I love your work. I'm working on a film called Go Veronica Go that happens to be featuring none other than Christina Ray Jackson here. And she created this really cool movie poster. And today she sent me another iteration of it with new color. I'm just growing. It's just like this is the creative process. I love it. So I'm working the story, I'm doing my note cards, I'm writing my drafts, and then this movie poster is being developed. It's all, for me, the inspiration to keep going toward the goal. Like, I know I have to finish the script and I have to get into production, but these little elements, little baby steps, all contribute to that. So my pro tip is, when you're braving your way in a film, sometimes, it helps to make the script complete by thinking about, what's the movie poster going to be? What are some of the visuals that are going to represent and promote and market this film? So yeah, that's how I'm braving my way this week.
And I got a little sneak peek, and it's pretty awesome. It's pretty exciting. I love the visuals of it because they really help you feel like the story is coming together. We're writers. We sit in rooms and we write. But when you have something visual that you could see and you could share, then it really starts to feel like this is coming to life.
It's coming to life 100%. So speaking of coming to life, we have somebody who brought something to life. This book right here came to be, the words came to be by our guest today, author Emily Ladau. Emily, welcome.
Welcome, Hi. Emily.
Hello.
We're so glad you're here. Go ahead and give us your intro for those who are you're watching live and on the replay and who'll be listening on the audio podcast. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, yes. Hi, my name is Emily Ladau. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman with brown hair and a ponytail, wearing big black rimmed glasses, and I've got on a red and black checked shirt and nothing particularly exciting in my background. And what you can't see on the screen is that I am a wheelchair user.
Yeah, and we're going
Yes, I
to.
forgot to add that.
You did, didn't you? I thought you did.
I'm a wheelchair user and I'm African American wearing a blue Superman shirt today. Thank you, Emily. You know, she is the disability rights advocate. She's on it. She's on camera on her podcast. She's a pro. So thank you.
I do my best, but anything that I can do to try to make things a little bit more accessible is what matters most to me.
Always.
That's definitely something we're excited to talk about today. I'm going to turn it over to Christina to start us out.
Yeah, so I'm in comic book land and I love me some origin stories. So Emily, please share your origin story with us. Where were you born and raised? And how has your journey led you into disability advocacy and now being an author?
Gosh, I wish I had a really cool origin story, like some kind of comic book superhero, but I'll give the one I have. So I'm coming to you from Long Island, New York, and I suppose my origin story is actually kind of fun. My mom has the same physical disability that I do. It's called Larson syndrome. It's a genetic joint and muscle disorder. So that's why I use a wheelchair to get around. And I would say a lot of people think that it's a tragedy when they hear that my mom passed on her disability, but to me, it's something that is very much a rewarding and wonderful part of my life and my relationship with my mother, and something that really gave me what I needed at an early age to gather the tools to become an advocate by watching my mom demonstrate what it meant to advocate for herself, for me, and also with the support of my dad, who has always, been behind me as I've been a rather loud and precocious little kid. And then when I was 10 years old, I had the opportunity to appear on several episodes of Sesame Street. And I recognize that's not something that everybody gets to do. But for me, it was really this moment of understanding that having that national platform to be able to educate people, kids and parents and caregivers about my disability experience, that was powerful, knowing that my voice could be heard, knowing that what I had to say mattered to people. And so at the time, I don't think as a 10-year-old I fully appreciated it, but in hindsight, I realized that was really the launching pad for where I am today and what I do, which is really focused on making disability and the ideas and the concepts surrounding it more accessible to non-disabled people and opening up those conversations.
So, Emily, I remember reading that about you in your bio, and I'm wondering if I have found the right clip. There's a clip of a girl wearing pink and glasses and brown hair. Is that you potentially in this video here with Big Bird?
No, that is not me. That is my predecessor.
Oh, so this was someone before
Yeah.
you. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So what happened was I had the opportunity to audition because Tara, whose image you saw there, she was getting older. She was kind of aging out, if you will, of being the younger set. And so as she was moving on, they were looking for another character with a disability to fill the role. And I happened to go to a summer camp for kids with physical disabilities. And so they actually got a phone call from the talent scout at Sesame Street, and they recommended me for the interview. And so I went from seeing Tara on TV and feeling represented from seeing her to being that person who could be that representation for other people.
So cool.
Wow, how powerful was that? Do you feel like that was a dramatic moment in your life that really changed the direction you were going in? Like after that, did you start leaning towards advocacy and realizing like being in front of the camera what that could do, or was that just like a one-off, a really cool experience, and then you kind of went back to your day-to-day life, or did that change your life at that point?
I think it did change my life in some ways. My plan had always been to be a teacher. I really wanted to teach high school English. And when I was in second grade, I actually had a teacher who was a wheelchair user, and my parents were very intentional about that. They asked that I be placed in her class because they wanted me to see somebody who was a role model. And that really meant something to me. Even at 7 years old in second grade, I said, I can be a teacher too. And so my plan had always been to be a teacher, and Sesame Street was probably the starting point of realizing I wanted to teach and I wanted to educate, but it wasn't until later in life that I shifted gears from pursuing a teaching career to pursuing advocacy. Although I'd been advocating all along, and honestly, advocacy is teaching, and teaching is in many ways advocacy. So, I think I just took a different path to get to where I was going.
Absolutely. And this book, this is a 101, Demystifying Disability. And I'd love if you could share just some experiences, because the book is beautiful in the way that it helps people understand what to say, what to know when interacting with people who are different from you. So can you share some of your experiences that helped you carve out the book for enlightening people on what to say exactly? What kind of experiences have you had that helped you realize, you know what, that's probably what you shouldn't say, and here's what you should say instead?
It's a great question. And to be honest, I drew a lot upon life experience. Nobody hands you a degree in the experience of having a disability, but when you exist in a disabled body, you end up gathering this entire collection of experiences of things that people say to you, whether they're well meaning or not, of ways that people act around you, of ways that people talk about disability, of how disability is represented in the media. And when you're surrounded by all these narratives, it really begins to become easy to internalize all of that. And so I'd always internalized all of these messages that said, disability is bad, you're unlovable, you take up too much space, you're a burden. And it's been an active and very conscious effort on my part to push past all of those feelings that I've internalized. And so, having gathered these experiences, I realized half the time, at least, if not most of the time, the reason that people may say or do something insensitive is because they are also surrounded by media narratives that are saying that disabled people are less than whole human beings. And so disability is seen as this scary, intimidating thing. And I want to push back against that and say, hey, I understand you may feel overwhelmed or alienated. You may feel like you're going to say the wrong thing. But for me, if I can bridge that gap, if I can give you some of the language that you need, some of the tools that you need, a little bit about etiquette, just to start the conversation, that to me is an incredible starting point. But I also give the caveat, I'm one person. I'm a white, physically disabled female, cisgender, wheelchair user. I communicate verbally. And so I come at this with only my disability experience. And it's true, I try to incorporate many stories of many people with different disabilities in the book, but the reality is that my experiences are only my own experiences. And I hope that the book is just one part of a person's learning and not where they start and where they end.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I got that from looking at your book, because I think I have a couple of different ideas going on in my head. One, from my vantage point, there's often conversations where people say they're afraid to, maybe they don't say it out loud like this, but they're afraid to try because of the insecurities of getting it wrong, and how they don't want to offend or hurt someone's feelings or then be canceled even, right? There's things that some people have seen probably that have gotten them sort of erased, because they've said an ableist type of thing, or whatever, fill in the blank, homophobic, sexist, etc. But I hear you from your point of view also saying, like, the reality is that you can't cover everything. You're this, in one book, in one life, you're never going to be able to speak to every single issue, but you need to start somewhere. And I really appreciated that kind of, again, in a great way, like this simplistic and minimalistic way, like even through the artwork, it's like, okay, let's just talk about these basic things. Let's talk about the history. Let's talk about how things can be normalized, and let's talk about things that we just have to eradicate. Like, you just should not be using this, fill in the blank. These types of words are harmful and they don't do what you think they're doing. So I really appreciated that. And I really want to encourage people who are watching and listening to get Demystifying Disability wherever you get books. We'll put the link in the chat for where it's being hosted on Emily's website. But I'm wondering kind of, what you learned now that it's out and it's in people's hands. What are some of the things? I ask this question. Sometimes people feel like I'm asking about regrets, and I'm not. But if you want to talk about it, then great. What would you do different now that you know what you know? Because we are always into like learning from, the iterations, right? The next book you write or whatever is going to be different because of what you learned here. So I guess the question is, what have you learned that you're going to do different next time after doing this book?
My gosh, it's been a real journey, quite honestly. And I was learning while I was writing it. I've learned since it's been published. I'm planning on continuing to learn from the experience. And so I think that it's just an ongoing evolution for me. I mean, there are 1 billion plus disabled people in the world, and that means that you are going to have 1 billion opinions and 1 billion experiences regarding what it means to have a disability. And so the first thing I had to learn real fast is that you're never going to get it right for everybody. Somebody is going to be left behind. And especially when it's coming from the lens of one particular person, in my case, coming from the lens and the experiences of a white female wheelchair user who does in many ways have privilege, although I'm also marginalized, I had to acknowledge that I was not going to fulfill every single experience or represent every single experience in the book. And that's a scary feeling, because when people look at the book, they think, oh, it must be the Encyclopedia of Disability or the Bible of Disability. And I'm very quick to tell people it's absolutely not. It's one book, it's one starting point. That being said, my goal was really to meet people where they're at. And so for me, that meant starting with a lot of the basics. And for some people, that is not radical enough at all. That is considered coddling other people who don't have disability. That's considered, giving them the easy way out. But then there's the flip side of people who have said that it feels like, even just from reading this book, that I'm scolding them for getting it wrong. And so what I've realized is that you're too radical for some people. You're not radical enough for other people. And I don't claim to speak for everybody. I don't claim this to be the definitive book on the disability experience. But looking back, I think what I would do differently, if anything, is really just focus on how I could even continue to broaden and deepen representation of disability outside my own experiences. But, all things considered, I am proud of the work that I've done, and I am grateful for all of the feedback that I get, because it proves a point that I make in the book, which is that, the disability community is not a monolith, and nobody's experiences and thoughts on it are ever going to be 100% the same.
That reminds me of one of Tony and our favorite quote. I'm not here to be right. I'm here to get it right. Did I get that quote right, Emily? It sounds like that's what you're saying.
You got Brene Brown's quote right. Yes, I believe.
All
yes.
right.
Shout out to
Brene Brown. Yeah, we're all out here trying, and right, we're not gonna get everything right, and we're not here to offend. We're just here to teach and to share our experiences in a way that we hope creates a more harmonious environment for everyone of all abilities. So I'd love for you to share your top tips for people listening and getting the book. How can we all become an ally? Because like you said, you and I, we have very different experiences. How can I be an ally to you? How can people, able-bodied people, be allies to us? What are your tips? How can we be allies?
Well, I think the first thing to remember is that just because you are marginalized in some way doesn't mean that you're suddenly free of the responsibility of being an ally to other people.
Exactly.
Just
Yeah.
because I'm disabled doesn't mean that it's not my responsibility to be a good ally to, first of all, people with other types of disabilities than me, people of different races than me, people of different gender identities and sexualities than me, religions. There are so many experiences that I
Snap, snap,
don't
snap.
have.
Yes.
And so, you know, I would never say to somebody, I'm disabled, so I totally understand what your experience as XYZ marginalization is like, because that is not true. The only experience that I understand is my own experience. And so, my first tip is, if you have it in your head that your experiences somehow absolve you of needing to be an ally to other people, get rid of that. Get rid of that thought, because that's not true. We all can do better in terms of being allies. And then regarding, actionable steps that anybody can take, whether or not they are disabled or identify as such, is really focusing on who is at the center of the conversation and who's missing from the conversations that we're having. I remind people so often that every issue is a disability issue, because disability cuts across every single identity. And so it doesn't matter what other identity group you're talking about, disability is part of it. And it doesn't matter what issue you're talking about, whether it's education, employment, healthcare, transportation, sex, relationships, right? Disability is still relevant. And so to be a good ally, you have to consciously ask yourself, is disability part of the conversation? If it's not, what can I do to make it part of the conversation? And more importantly, am I the one who needs to be at the center of this conversation? Or is it my job to be passing the microphone to somebody whose experiences are more relevant and more central to this conversation? And what can I do to amplify that? And so that's really what I would want to leave people with in terms of allyship.
That
I
is
love it.
good. That's good. Okay, so here's a question I have. I've seen this a couple times and I felt convicted around like the idea of the table, right? We've talked about, you probably heard, we need more people to come to the table or be invited to the table, and kind of that phrase, which I really have liked, I think. But I found myself seeing some, fingers pointed in good ways, like, hey, even how we phrase the table gives some power to who has the table. And so as you're talking, I'm thinking about in my realm when it comes to the creative world, to filmmaking, screenwriting, and my goals for show running television and writers' rooms. That's a very easy symbol or image to conjure up in our head, is like who is at the table, right? So I'm wondering, for both of you, how could we better talk about that? How could we better phrase that or ask that question or point it out in ways that doesn't also tip the scales to who has the power and authority to invite to the table, own the table, whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'll let Emily take that. I think she kind of spoke a little bit to that when she said, to be an ally, really take a pause and think who's in the room and who's missing. And so just there's no table, but we should all be invited into the space. We should all feel welcome in the room wherever we are. Everyone should feel like they have a voice and they have a right to be in this space. Table or no table, seat or no seat, that we're all welcome in this space, and our opinions and our experiences are valid. I think, yeah. What were you going to say, Emily?
I love that, the concept of not even having a table and just having that open space. And it's funny because I talk about the concept of who's at the table a lot, but the questions that I ask are not necessarily just who's at the table, but thinking about everything surrounding this metaphorical table. So, first of all, is the table accessible? Can everybody actually get to the table? And I'm talking literally and figuratively here. So, how do we get into the building where the table is? Once we're at the table, is there room for people with different types of disabilities? Once we're all sitting around the table, are the materials accessible to everybody? Is the conversation accessible to everybody? What happens at the table? Who's dominating the conversation? What is being created at the table, and what is the ultimate goal, and who's being represented and what's being created. So, yes, the table is the metaphor, but it's really this center of so many other questions from point A to point B, from beginning to end of a creative process of a conversation. And so if we're not thinking about disability except for to say, oh yeah, there's a guy in a wheelchair here, so we're fine, then we're really, really missing the actual point. And also, there's a saying that the disability community uses a lot, which is nothing about us without us. And there are many advocates who take that one step further and say nothing without us. And so nothing about us without us is to say, don't talk about disability without having disabled people at this metaphorical table. But nothing without us is to say, again, every issue is a disability issue. Disabled people need to be a part of those conversations naturally and organically. And part of that means asking yourself, should I be giving permission to disabled people? Am I making room for them at the table? Am I letting them be part of this group at the table? Or is it that they already belong at the table and it's my turn to step back and make sure that they have a place there?
Yeah, that's good. I really appreciate that. I think for anybody listening, in the creative world, as many of our audience is, this is a really important conversation. When you're putting together a film crew, when you are writing a script, to see who are the characters, who are the people, who's the production crew, and intentionality is super important. If you don't know somebody who has a physical disability, or an invisible disability, any disability, you might start to ask yourself, why not? How might I know somebody? And maybe you ask other people how I can be more inclusive in the storytelling. I'm thinking about some of the work that Christine and I have done with DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, a lot of webinars that we did over the past couple of years. It's been really cool to hear companies start to question this. Like, are our buildings, are our meeting rooms, are our retreats, are the things that we're doing for staff development inclusive of all people? And this book does a good job of talking about what is ableism and how there's some ignorant, unconscious biases that I have that I don't even realize I do. I do things in the way I move about the world in a way that prevents other people from being who they are, or acknowledging, that other people, the differing abilities that exist in the world. And so it's such a humbling place to be. And I think if we all can be willing to be wrong, sometimes it's really hard to say, you know what, I've missed the point, I got it wrong. But gosh, I'm so attracted to people who are humble like that, who position themselves, even as you were talking, Emily, like, I don't have every response for every single person. Like, that's really engaging for me. I want to sit next to someone and listen to someone like that, as opposed to someone who seems to have all the answers. So all that to say, we don't have to have all the answers. We can get it wrong. And sometimes that's the best place to be as a human being.
Oh yeah, existing in that messiness is honestly a beautiful thing. And also, statistically speaking, I can pretty much guarantee that everyone knows somebody who has a disability or themselves has a disability, even if they don't identify as such. I mean, the statistic right now is something like 1 in 4 American adults have a disability. And so, 1 billion plus people around the world, again, right? Everybody knows somebody who's disabled, different types of disabilities, different manifestations of disabilities. Maybe you yourself have a disability and don't consider it such. And so when we think about it that way, the question should really be not, who's missing, but what am I doing that is making it so these people are missing? Because they're not missing They're very much a part of the fabric of our society. Disabled people have always been here. Human history is disability history because we've always existed. And so when you look at it that way, ask yourself, am I someone who has made my presence and my surroundings a safe space for people to say, I do have a disability. I do need this support. I do need this accommodation. This is my experience, and I belong here just like you do.
I love that. I love what you're saying about take responsibility in a way where you could see, how am I contributing to the problem and not the solution, and how can I turn that around? Because I think if you don't take a pause to see, am I contributing in some negative way, you never will realize that you are and that you could be. And that is whether you have a disability or not. You know, like you said, we have to be allies for each other. I don't know your experience and you don't know my experience. We have very different disabilities. Although we're moving through the world on wheels, we still don't know everything, you know? So I want to take responsibility and take a step back and really think, you know, am I contributing in some way that is creating a limited space for Emily? Is there something that I'm doing that is limiting her and not, you know, giving her the space to shine the way that she should be shining? And or are you going to say something?
You really resonated with me just now because this is something that I've had to continually remind myself of. You know, I'm in a very privileged position where I can share my story, where people do make space for me. But I've had to ask myself time and again, as somebody with this position of privilege, what am I going to do with that? And it's not that I want people to automatically assume that they are somehow guilty or that they are somehow in the wrong or always doing the wrong thing. A lot of times we just don't know. And once we know better, we do better. And so what I'm asking is not that everybody tries to get it right immediately, but I'm asking that everybody is willing to meet me where I'm at and begin to learn. And that includes me meeting other people where they're at, because I have to make space for people with different types of disabilities in the same way that I'm asking people to make space for me.
I love it. Okay, so Emily. Oh, go ahead, Tony.
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Last comment before we do our brave phase.
Yeah. Last comment, Emily. Joe Biden calls. He wants you to put together a task force to craft out a new narrative for the country, how disability stories will be celebrated and told. What's your first move?
Oh my gosh. I would immediately be like, Joe, get on Twitter. Get on Instagram. No, in all seriousness, I love that question. If there was an opportunity to reshape the narrative, I would immediately turn it over to disability justice activists who have been working really tirelessly to talk not just about disability, but how things like ableism intersect with racism, how they intersect with lots of different forms of oppression. And I want people to understand that the conversation doesn't really stop at disability. I think the current administration is certainly trying their best to up the ante with disability representation. So I love to see that. But, you know, my dream team task force would be the grassroots advocates who are on the ground, who are doing the work, who are shifting the narrative in their communities. And a lot of those people are the people who are really grounded in the work of disability justice. And if you want to learn more about disability justice, I really suggest checking out the resource Skin, Tooth, and Bones from Sins Invalid. It's a fantastic primer on disability justice.
Well, this has been so good. Thank you, Emily, for coming on the show. Her Instagram has her name, Emily Ladau. You can see it right there. It'll be in our chat as well as in the show notes on the podcast. Please get her book, Demystifying Disability. What to know, what to say, and how to be an ally. It's a great quick read. It's like a little resource companion. So you don't even have to read it from front to cover. You can kind of page through and go, I need to learn about the history. I need to learn about etiquette. I need to learn about terminology. It's just really, really, really good. And we've got Christine Burke in the comments who's saying all sorts of great stuff. So hi, Christine. Leroy and Keith of Sins Invalid. She's putting her stamp of approval. on those things. But we're really grateful to connect with you, Emily, and hope that we see more books and more things come out of you. And I would love to find that clip of you on Sesame Street. So if you can get those to us, we'll share them, because that is super fun.
It exists.
We got to find it, because that's super fun. I think Sesame Street, speak about inclusivity, from the beginning was a brave maker, braving their way, trailblazing into inclusive media. So cool. We take for granted that this has been around for so long, and they've done such great work. So, all right. Well, hope you follow Emily and buy her book. And now let's go into our Brave Faves.
Brave Faves. TV shows, films, books, songs, technology, clothing, podcast, food, and more. These are a few of our favorite people, places, and things. Brave Faves.
All right, my Brave Fave is a quote from one of my favorite teachers. I love teachers, and this is from my favorite spiritual teacher, Eckhart Tolle. And the quote is, "Prejudice of any kind implies that you are identified with the thinking mind. It means you don't see the other human being anymore, but only your own concept of that human being. To reduce the aliveness of another human being is being to a concept is already a form of violence." So I'm going to read the last line. To reduce the aliveness of another human being to a concept is already a form of violence. His work is amazing. I love that quote. I'm just marinating on that and thinking about that. I think if we all just take a beat to really think about what that means, as we interact with each other of all different backgrounds. And we do that, like Tony was saying, sometimes you don't realize you have biases and conditionings, and we reduce people, and that's the opposite of what we should ever be doing. So that's my Brave Fave. Eckhart Tolle, check out his work, and that's my Brave Fave for the week.
Right on. Well, my Brave Fave is the film King Richard. Oh my gosh, Will Smith, y'all. It's so good and motivating. The Serena and Venus Williams story. Just a treat to see this played out, to see this amazing family and the commitment. And, the acting is just, it blows your mind really how powerful the acting is. And I thought, I am not an athlete whatsoever, but I was inspired for the commitment and drive that this father had. And some might go like, what the heck? This dad really pushed his kids. But oh my gosh, there was something in me that really kind of rose up to go, I need to level up my commitment and my drive, and not just for my, my creative goals, but those around me, believe in them so much and push them when they need to be pushed. So check it out. Lots of buzz going around on the performances. Definitely, I'm sure we're going to see it in the Oscar race. So King Richard, Will Smith.
Yes, I checked it out. It's awesome. It's beautiful. Very inspiring. Yeah.
All right, Emily, what you got?
All right. I love this. And so right now, I would say my Brave Fave is the TV show Sex Lives of College Girls. I am just so delighted by that show. And I especially love Lauren Lolo Spencer. I had the opportunity to do an event with her a while back, a virtual event. And so just seeing her on the screen as this badass disabled woman embracing her sexuality, oh my gosh, life-giving. I feel like I want that like injected into my veins, like plastered on my walls, like on repeat. Every morning when I wake up, it's just the energy that I need. So 100% my Brave Fave.
That's so cool.
Love it. Shout out to Lola. Lola's from Stockton. We're both 209 girls. We got to get her on the show. Lola, if you're listening, reach out. We'd love to have you.
That's so cool. Again, the power of representation, seeing people on the screen that motivate you to live your best true self. We need more of that. We need more diverse lives, all abilities represented in film and TV. That's why Brave Maker exists. We're here to do that. So awesome, Emily. Hang out. Again, glad you were with us. You who are watching and or listening know that maybe you don't, that we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and this work that Christine and I do, we started because we wanted to make a difference in the film and media landscape. We wanted to create opportunities for people to see themselves, to tell stories that are open and inclusive for all people. And we are doing that as our first feature film comes out in just like 4 months in 2022 called Last Chance Charlene. And our next one, Go Veronica Go, which will be starring Christina Ray Jackson, comes out. We are going after this with abandon. Encourage you to go to our website at bravemaker.com/donate to become a donor. Giving Tuesday was yesterday, and it was like very anticlimactic. I know it's so exhaustive, and people are so like tired. They have giving fatigue. I get it. But we have 31 days left to end our fiscal year strong. We're going to Sundance Film Festival in January. We're going to keep getting inspired. We're keep raising funds. Christina and I just talked with an amazing person from Grand Rapids, Michigan, about partnering there and bringing the Brave Maker work to Michigan to expand our efforts. So things are happening. Please go to our website, sign up on our mail list at bravemaker.com/buzz, and you could always be clued in. We appreciate all the likes and subscriptions, shares, and following us on YouTube because it helps us tell our stories. Christina, what's coming up next week?
We have an awesome show next week. We're going to be joined by the crew for the Sid Family Christmas Eve game night. Yes. It's a wonderful film, and we'll have the director as well as the writer and producer with us. I hope I don't mess up her name. I'm going to try it. Fazia Mirza. Can't wait to have you next week. We can't wait to chat. Come back next week, 4 p.m. We'll be back at our regular time, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Join us as we chat with the crew from the Sid Family Xmas Eve game night.
December 8th. And it's a queer Muslim holiday movie. How often do you hear that as a genre? So that's awesome. Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thank you again to our guest, Emily Ladau. Follow her on Instagram and her website. And Emily, we wish you the best and hope you can come back again and share all your fun information. Hang out with us until after our end. We'd love to do a screenshot photo with you so we could post.
Heck yeah. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me to this party. I'm just so excited to have been here.
Right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Brave stories change the world.
And you are the story. Bye, everybody.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at bravemaker.org. Like, subscribe, and share. To become a monthly donor, text the word BraveMaker to 44321 or go to bravemaker.com/donate. Thanks for tuning in.